Hi, gang. Let's talk about Chapter 1 and what this, I want to say what this course or what Windows operating systems is all about. And we're not limited to just Windows, but let's talk about what operating systems are, how they work, and why we need them. So, to start off, what is an operating system? Now, an operating system is some form of software that the text says it controls a computer, but it does more than just controls a computer. It allows us as users to interact with the computer hardware. So it does in fact control the hardware, but it's that in between for us to be able to interact with the hardware. Now, I don't speak machine language. And machine language is all zeros and ones. I speak a couple of languages, but I don't speak the language, per se, that computer hardware requires to be able to interact. But my operating systems that I have available, depending on the operating systems, they have the capability to interact with those specific hardware platforms. Now, not all hardware platforms are the same. Apple and PC are vastly different, and they require specific operating systems to interact with the hardware. Now, if I have a PC hardware device, I need an operating system that can, let's call it, communicate or speak with that hardware. It needs to understand that language and a language for the specific devices that we're dealing with. Same thing holds true with a Mac or Apple devices. They require a specific OS or a group of OSs that we have available to us that we can pick from to interact with the hardware. And now, depending on the hardware version, we may be required to use a certain operating system. Okay. So let's look at an operating system as a translator of sorts that allows us to interact with the hardware by utilizing that operating system. So for us to interact now with the operating system, that brings another level of complexity. We've got pretty much two different ways that we can interact with an operating system. One being a command line, which is, it appears on the screen as just a black background of a window, and it's all entering text. You need to know the exact syntax is the word we use to interact with the operating system, but it's all text-based. And if I went into, let's say my start menu on my computer and did a search for CMD, that would open up a command prompt. That is the type of interaction that we would have with an operating system. Now, Mac is different. I apologize, I primarily focus on PC because the majority of what we're going to deal with in this A+ course, or the operating system security side of the A+ course, is PC based. It's not to say we avoid or don't interact with Macs. We've got an entire chapter that deals with that. So with that said, we've got a command line interface, which people tend to avoid it because it requires you to know that specific syntax and the specific commands, and it's very text-oriented in that you have to type everything in. Sometimes you could copy-paste stuff in, but there's a lot of user interaction. Now, that's not what we're dealing with now in the browser you're using and the software you're using to view this video. We use what's called a graphical user interface. So our operating system is not just a translator for the operating system to talk to the hardware. It also has a translator of sorts for us to interact with the operating system. It allows us to interact with it by using images and our interaction with pictures or images, graphics, if you will. So it's not just text-based, it's, for the most part, image-based. Now, we do have to type in text here and there, but I'll move what's called a cursor around the screen to interact with these graphical images or graphical user interfaces that we're dealing with. Okay. So, with that said, we're going to proceed. We'll talk about the different operating systems, and the one that I'm using on my computer and what we focus on primarily in this chapter will be Windows 10. Now, Windows is a Microsoft operating system, and it's been around for a very long time. We had Windows 95. Before that, we had Windows 8.x, and we've had different 3.x. We have different iterations of Windows. Now, when we're talking about Windows operating systems over the years have been the kind of thing where after about 3 to 5 years, they roll out a new version. And that new version could be very similar with minor changes made, or it could be distinctly different. And some of the updates or new versions that they've created have been so different that the users fought back. They said, yeah, we don't want to deal with this. We don't like it. It's not what we're used to. Now, that took place with a shift from Windows XP to any of those that followed it afterwards. And there were a couple of versions they tried to come out with where, like I said, users fought them. Now, Windows XP was so widely adopted that we used it in many places and we had no idea that we were using it. If you went to, let's say, a grocery store or a convenience store, odds are the clerk was interacting with a computer device that ran on Windows XP. If you went to an ATM to get money out of the bank, that ATM was likely running on Windows XP. And what had happened was they decided, hey, we're going to come out with a new version of Windows. It's going to be better and everybody's going to love this. And they didn't really like it so much. And many of the hardware manufacturers and different institutions around the world decided, no, I'm going to stick with XP. And not getting too drawn out into history, what ended up happening was Microsoft said, all right, we're done supporting XP. If you want to keep using it, you're on your own. So there's some incentive to adopt these new versions or iterations of operating systems. We may not like them all, but if we're going to use the software, we have to go along with it. Or use the hardware, we have to go along with what's supported. Now, in the chapter, we've got an image of a desktop for a computer. Now, the desktop is our primary interaction with the operating system. The bottom left corner, we have our start menu, And if we click on the icon in the bottom right corner, it's a Windows icon. It looks like 4 square tiles very close to each other. And if we expand that or click on that icon, it'll expand out that start menu. And that start menu can be expanded upon if you click on any of the items in the menu. Now, that start menu shows us different applications that are in that menu. So applications are software that has been added to or part of the operating system for us to complete tasks. It may be software to control a hardware device. There's a number of different things that software could do for us. We're running software. I'm running software right now that will record this lecture. Now, it's interacting with my microphone. It's interacting with my display to capture whatever's on my screen. Right? So these applications allow us to interact with hardware in a variety of different ways. Now, keep in mind, an operating system is doing that interaction with the hardware on our behalf. So if we add another layer onto the operating system, which is an application, there's something else that's going on within the system. Now, if we think about this like an office, we've got a manager in the office. I'm the owner of the business, and I've got a manager in the office that's going to take care of the day-to-day things that I need to have done. That manager has to take care of facilities. It has to take care of people. And it needs to be able to, let's say we have facilities that they may not all be in the same country. We have employees that may not all speak the same languages. That manager needs to be able to interact with all the entities of my business. All right. So if that puts things in a little better perspective of the operating system being equivalent to a manager for my business, the best manager I can have is going to be the one that has all the attributes needed to interact with everything and everybody within my business and does it efficiently. Now, does that say, or does that mean that there won't from time to time be a better manager out there and I can replace the one I've got? And is it necessarily going to work with everything that I've got within my organization? That's where these problems come up. Okay. Now, over time, we've come up with new versions of operating systems. And let's say that I have I'll use that analogy again, that manager for my business that knows my equipment so well that that individual could take that equipment apart, put it back together without even seeing it. He could, what they say, do it within his sleep and not even think about it because it's so second nature. And now I decide I've got to let that one go and I have to hire a new manager. And this new manager now knows nothing about that old piece of equipment. Can't run it, can't fix it, can't do anything like that. It could be an issue, right? Now, my new manager says, look, I don't deal with old equipment like that. I can only work on the new equipment. I can't deal with that old stuff. Now, with that said, what choices do we have? We can use an older manager again, have both of them working for us, or we replace a piece of equipment. Now, we get in that bind sometime when these new versions of operating systems come out. And I'll talk about it further in other videos of how we go about workarounds. But in essence, we can teach that new manager, if you will, how to act like an old manager. All right. And we'll do that with virtual machines. Like I said, we'll talk about that a few chapters ahead. Okay, so we've got a notification area down at the bottom. We've got our system tray down at the bottom of the screen. We've got applications that are pinned down there to the left of that notification area. So our notification tray is down on the right of the bottom bar. And then we've got the applications that are pinned. They start on the left and move across. So in the very bottom left corner, we've got our icon for the start menu. We've got what looks like a magnifying glass, which is a search search icon, and then we've got task view to the right of our search icon. Now search, if we want to find a certain application, we can run it there, or I could click that and type in CMD, which I mentioned before, and pull up a command prompt if I wanted to run that. All right. So the start menu is where we have a lot of stuff stored. All right. So how do you know which, if we're going to run Windows, let's assume we have a PC. When it comes to PC, we've got a couple of different operating systems we can choose from. But let's say that we want to stick, for whatever reason, with a Microsoft operating system because it's what we've used in the past or what our friends have told us. How do we know which one that we can use or what's right for our computer? And we've got to have an understanding of what the operating system will do, how it will do it, the limitations of what it can control and what it cannot control. When we think about that new manager we hired that doesn't know anything about the equipment, we need to know how compatible is a specific operating system with the hardware that we're dealing with. And we could do that by doing a little bit of research or homework and go to the Microsoft site and look through each one of the operating system versions to see what is it that they do, can't do. Now, the recent ones that we may deal with are Windows 8, Windows 8.1, which is essentially Windows 8 with patches or fixes on it. They actually released Windows 8 with known issues. We've also got, and we'll lump them together as Windows 8-ish. The next big one that came out with was Windows 10. And their idea for Windows 10 was that we're going to create this operating system that you're never going to have to replace. We'll just continually give you updates for forever. From what I understand now, they've decided, no, we're going to come up with a Windows 11 now. And we'll see how soon that comes out and what that involves. All right. So if I'm going to use an operating system, there's some things I need to know. The features of that operating system, what's available, what it can do. Okay. Aside from that, the interface that you're dealing with. Now, if we go through the chapter, I'm not going to cover every page of the chapter. I still want you to go do some reading and go through. We've got concepts like File Explorer. And if I click on, there's a folder icon that I have pinned on my bar at the very bottom. And if I click on that, or I could also go into my Start menu, and you'll see it here, File Explorer. So I click that File Explorer. It opens up in a new window for me. And I've got a navigation system here. It's kind of like an outline. I've got to be limited on how or what I open up because of privacy expectations or requirements. But this navigation, if you will, allows me to go dig in to see what exists, where it is, at a folder level or device level or at a drive level. Now, the device is my system as a whole. It's a PC. I may be connected to external drives, like a thumb drive, USB drive, networked drive, my local hard drive. Now, this PC would be my operating system and folders within it. And we've got primary folders within that PC, or what we call as default folders, things that we see all, no matter which operating system we're dealing with. So I've got 3D objects, desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, videos, what have you. Documents are not necessarily document like we think a sheet of paper or a digital sheet of paper, but they are files that we want to keep for whatever reason. They're not limited to just a document. So that's our storage of things. I like to think about it like a closet. Downloads are things that I have brought from the internet or from outside and brought them into my computer, and I still just haven't yet taken them and put them away. The desktop, I like to talk about that in that that's what we looked at, or what we saw. Back up. It's what we see in this image, but it's kind of covered over by the start menu being expanded. But we see in the background there, that's the desktop. And on our desktop, we'll have icons. And those icons allow us to access resources on the computer. Now, whatever we have running in, or I should say on our desktop, I'll say this early, and I'll talk about it many times moving forward. Whatever exists on our desktop is stored in RAM, random access memory. Random access memory is volatile memory, and what that means is there is no permanent copy of it. If something happens to it, it's gone for forever. So let's say you create a Word document, but you haven't yet given it a name or saved it. Until it's given a name or saved, or the operating system has created a temporary copy of it for you, it's in RAM. And if anything happens to it before you save it, it's gone. And you can't get it back. The only thing you have going for you is if the operating system or the application, either one has for some reason saved a copy of it just in case. And that's not something you can count on. So what we'll do is if we create something, we need to make sure it's stored in long-term memory and not in RAM. We'll talk about that further as we move forward. All right. Now, one of the things about that File Explorer is that I can look at what's going on my computer. Now, if I come down to, let's see, Windows C. Windows C is my hard drive on my computer. Now, these hard drives, or these drives, they started out, we had A and B, which were, they're legacy drives, they're floppy drives from decades ago now. Then we have C as your primary hard drive used by the operating system. D is traditionally an optical drive or a CD drive, external media drive. And then from there, we'll have additional hard drives or networked drives. So each one has a letter. Now, in this operating system, we've got a number of different files, but I don't necessarily want to look at the files. I'm going to go look at what's going on my computer. So I'm going to right click instead of left clicking and seeing what's there. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go look at properties of that PC or that drive, and I could see properties, my version of Windows 10, what I'm dealing with. I can see how much RAM I have. I touched on that before, the processor. There's different attributes about my system. Okay. What if I go to my Windows C and I want to go look at the properties of it? Well, I see that I've got a certain amount of space used, how much is used and how much is not. Okay. From there, You know, what if I go to, and I'm going to scroll up, a quick access, and I click on quick access, I could see what's going on here, the different files that I've created recently, and I see that I'm on quick access. Now, what if I want to look on, let me see, go to, I should have it on here. Well, let's look here. I'm on my computer again, or this PC. I've got the folders, my default folders. But down below that, I've got devices and drives. So I've only got two primary devices or drives. My primary, which is C, I talked before, that's about what's being used by my operating system. And then I've got a local disk Q, which is an additional drive. And I can see, depending on the drive, how much space is available, 237 gig, and I see how much is free. Okay. Now, why is that important? Well, it's like going to the grocery store and buying a bunch of frozen food and your freezer's already full. What are you going to do with it when you get home? Well, you can't do anything with it. All right, your hard drive is limited in space. How much space is there? If you don't have any free space, you can't add anything to it. If you can't add anything to it, it could stop you. It could slow you down, or it could actually stop you. And the same thing holds true with RAM that we talked about before. So it's good to know where you stand with the resources you have available within your device. Okay. We've got different power options for our device. And if I come down to, I'm hoping it's coming up on my screen. I'm going to assume that it's not. And I'm going to go to, let's see here, we're in chapter 1. Let's go ahead and pop through where I get where I really want to be. Now, I'll just put in a page number. If you ever have to search for a certain page number, if there's reference by myself or another faculty member, go to page whatever. You don't see page numbers at the bottom of these pages in a digital book, but you could type the page up top, go to page 26, hit enter, and it'll take me to page 26. Well, let's talk about power options. Okay. We've got a power applet that's in the control panel. And if I click on it, it'll give a little discussion of what it is, what it does. So any of these things you see blue in the digital book, you click on it, and there's a little explanation or a definition, if you will. Okay, so the different modes that we've got within our power options. We've got a sleep mode. Now, in the recent versions of Windows 7, 8, and 10, we've got a sleep mode. It's also been called standby mode or suspend mode. And it brings you down to about 1 to 2%, or automatically, if you got a laptop, it'll bring you down automatically to about 1-2% of the battery power. If you're going to wake it up, all you do is just move your mouse or press your power button, bring it back up online, depending on the system. Okay. Now, we've got other modes. We've got a hibernation mode. It saves what you've got on your hard drive and then powers down the system. I mean, you press the power button, it loads everything back up to right where you were. We could set these things to happen at a certain point in time after so many minutes, whatever it may be. And we can do that in the configuring Windows power plans. We've got a lab that will cover this, and you'll go through it step by step. Now, this chapter in the book covers it. Take your time and understand which options exist and how we're going about implementing each of the different options. All right, I talked about, or we went to that system window where we could see the different attributes of the system. Okay. If I go to Windows settings, I think, let me see. There we go. Go to Windows settings. So over on the left, if you expand the start menu, you'll see, looks like a sprocket or a cog. And if you click on that, that'll take you to settings. Let me back up. Where is it? It should show me. There we go. And that's a little application that's built within Windows. And in Windows 10, it looks like this. And you can go access the different types of settings: system settings, device settings, network and internet settings, personalization settings, settings associated with applications, account settings, time and language settings, gaming settings. So we've got different settings available to us. We've got update and security settings. When the updates take place, do you require, or do you let it happen on its own, or do you check to see what's going on first? You know, it's horrible when you're sitting having, let's say I'm sitting here recording this video for you right now, and then all of a sudden my system decides, all right, I'm going to update now. I had a faculty member just email me yesterday and said she was in the middle of class, and the classroom computer decided to do an update while she was lecturing using the PowerPoints. Once it starts, you don't have control over it. It's going to go do what it needs to do. Never stop an update in process. I repeat, never stop an update once it's in process. You can undo it, but don't, after it's already completed, but do not stop it. Because things, if they're partially done, cause the computer to only work partially the way that it's supposed to, and sometimes it's hard to fix what did not get completed. Okay. Okay, the different things that the operating system is going to control. Now, like I said, the hardware within the system unit itself, and the system unit, doesn't matter if I'm talking about a desktop computer or a laptop computer. It's the things within the computer. The hard drive, the BIOS, the motherboard, the different chipsets, as well as the peripherals, the things connected to the system unit. The mouse, the keyboard, the printer, the display, or we may call it a monitor, network drives, network connectivity. Those things are controlled by the operating system. Each one has its own distinct, I want to say, sub-language, if you will. And that sub-language, specific to that hardware device, the word that we'll use is drivers. Now, if there's a new version of a driver, that just means that there's a little more updated language for the operating system to talk to that device. If I buy a new printer and install it, I have to have the new drivers to talk to that new printer. Okay. One of the things that we deal with in this first chapter is knowing how to talk to people, how to interact with our clients or customers. There's an assumption, valid or invalid, but there is an assumption that if you are taking an A+ exam, which this course I cover one of the two A+ exams, then you are in some way supporting users, either a software support desk, help desk, or as a system technician where you're repairing hardware and software on devices. Okay, now with that said, If you're going to support the clients, you need to be able to interact with the clients. And we've got a number of different things that are outlined within the chapter. But what I want you to focus on is, we may have heard that old phrase, the customer is always right. No, the customer is not always right. But the customer is always the customer. And that's how we stay in business, is by having customers. So it's not necessarily that the customer is always right. The customer is how we stay in business. And we've got a choice. Either we're going to interact with the customer in a way that keeps them as our customer and promotes that relationship with us and our customers, or ultimately we're going to end up out of business. Now, we may not have the best people skills, and that is something that can be learned. Our customers may not have the best people skills. It's not their job to become better customers. But we can help them at times. The better educated our customers are, the better customers they'll be. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to be condescending or demeaning in any way and tell them, well, they don't know what they're talking about, we're going to educate them or school them. That's not what I'm saying. We can do it in a diplomatic and politically correct way, a way that makes them embrace this new knowledge that we're imparting or sharing with them. So they understand that they've got a better understanding of what they're doing and they're growing along the way. Okay. So these, what we call soft skills or people skills, being able to interact with the customer, it is actually part of the exam. There's a soft skills or customer service, customer interaction component within this first part of the exam. Right. Always try to avoid escalating an issue. We're not diminishing or discounting or taking any value away from the perceived severity of the issue on the client's part. Right. Never diminish what they consider a significant issue. Now, sometimes if you think back to your interaction with help desk and support technicians, they can be very dry, and we don't want to get emotional with our clients. They may be emotional already, but at the same time, I don't want to feel dry and like I'm just one of those robocalls. I don't want my clients interacting with me and me coming across like I'm a machine. Not a machine. Just like the interaction that we may have in the classroom or the way I come across to you in this video. Okay. There's ways to interact with clients, and we need to think about, first and foremost, how we're going to maintain that relationship with the client. Okay. One last thing I want to talk about before we go is our computers are now networked devices for the most part. They can connect either via a wired network connection or a wireless connection. Okay. So you may hear the term SOHO, and in computers or technology, a SOHO is a small office or home office. It's usually called a peer-to-peer network, meaning those computers are talking to each other and they're sharing resources. Now, once we connect to the outside world, we're still potentially a peer-to-peer, but then our connection or our topology becomes different. It's not limited to just the people within the building. As soon as you connect your device to an internet connection that accesses the outside world, think of that as you're giving a key to your home to somebody else. And if you're going to do that, you need to trust that individual and know that they have your best interest at heart. Now, if your ISP or your internet service provider That's who you're getting your network connection from usually. It is, let's say, Comcast or Xfinity, whatever we want to call it today. You're connecting your devices to their network. What's preventing somebody from going through that network connection and accessing your computer? It's a viable question. And do you know the answer to it? And those are answers that we would need to have. It's much like if I gave a friend of mine a key to my house to watch my dog while I'm away. What's preventing them from giving somebody else that key, or somebody else having access to that key when my friend doesn't know it, and them coming into my house? These security issues are things that we're going to talk about over time, and how to protect our resources, how to secure our network. They're very important. There's a lot of money spent on them today. Okay, so go through, read everything that I've covered and everything that I haven't covered in this chapter. Take your time on any practice exercises that we've got. Okay. The lab manuals, they are not graded. They are something that has to be manually evaluated. Use them as a way to kind of make you think, but do them if you have the extra time to do them. Okay? Go through the simulations. Go through what you've got, and then look at the labs. Go through those labs as many times as you need to. We've got 5 labs in this module. Go through them as many times as you need to master those labs. If you run into problems in the labs, reach out in the assignment support forum. See if somebody else had the same problem and how did they resolve it. Okay? Look in that assignment support forum often, because there may be something ahead of you that you don't know is out there and it's already been discussed. So if you know what to expect ahead of time, check it out. Go look and see what's there. Another thing that I've added into the course is this tips and tricks and insights for each module. And I'm working through and collecting the data. As it stands at the time of this recording, the average difficulty for this module on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being easy and 5 being difficult, prior students have scored it a 1.96, so just shy of a 2. Now that's on a range of 1 to 3. Nobody's reported in recent terms as considering Module 1 being more difficult than a level 3, which I consider average. So it's from easy to average. Okay. The number of hours spent, students have reported anywhere from 3 to 12 hours, the amount of time they invested or spent on this module. Now, that varies because some people spend a great deal of time going over any practice labs or the lab manuals to get ready for things and doing things over and over again. Okay. Others said, look, I got it done, I did well, I got this, I'm moving on. And that's the 3 hours that I saw being reported. There's some time management insights that are noted, and students have shared some tips and tricks. So review that tips, tricks, and insights page, and when you go to do your reflection, please take the time to input things that benefited you or could benefit somebody else, so I can add those things to these tips, tricks, and insights. Try to be as accurate as you can when it comes to time. And any issues or problems you had, share them with me so I know what's going on, so that moving forward, I can help you and help others. All right. I'll see you in the next module. Ask questions early and often, and have a great rest of the module.